When I reviewed my credit card statement in mid-December, I froze in place, not from the cold wind outside the window but from what I saw. The same location, the same date and time pattern, repeating every Tuesday for 3 months straight. My name is Owen, and I've been living in the suburbs of Sacramento with my wife Sandra for approximately 15 years. We inhabit a modest brick house on Magnolia Street, in the same place where I believed we had built our life together. I work as a tax planning specialist at one of the local firms, a profession that demands attention to detail, precision, and client trust. It's quiet, measured work. Nothing glamorous like in the movies, but it provides us with stability and security. Sandra works as a pharmacist at a chain pharmacy. She knows most of our neighbors by name, always wears a smile, and carries herself with warmth that makes people naturally gravitate toward her. Until recently, I genuinely believed we had everything necessary for a happy marriage. We seemed to have built something real, something that could last. In the mornings, she would hum while making coffee. In the evenings, she would ask about my day, listening intently as I talked about my clients and their tax situations. These small moments felt like the foundation of something solid. The early years of our marriage were vibrant and full of possibility. We met through mutual friends, starting with simple friendship that gradually deepened into something more profound. I was a divorced man when we met. My first marriage had ended about 8 years before I knew Sandra, roughly 10 years ago now. My ex-wife and I simply didn't understand each other. Our worldviews diverged in fundamental ways that neither of us could bridge. We tried counseling, we tried compromise, but ultimately, we were incompatible people trying to force compatibility. The marriage felt like trying to fit two puzzle pieces together that were never meant to connect. However, when Sandra appeared in my life, everything seemed to shift. She was different in ways I didn't expect. She listened to me, truly listened, in a way my first wife never had. She asked about my days, my thoughts about work, my perspectives on life. She remembered small details I mentioned in passing. She would surprise me with coffee made exactly how I liked it, remembering that I preferred it slightly stronger than most people. In the beginning, our relationship felt like stepping out of a cold room into warmth and light. I remember thinking that I had been given a second chance at happiness, something I didn't believe was possible after my first marriage crumbled. The years passed quietly and comfortably. Sandra's brother lived far away in another state, but my sister Bridget visited us frequently. She would often say that Sandra was exactly what I needed, that she brought out the best in me. My colleagues at work, especially Rudolph, with whom I shared an office, also noticed the change in me after the marriage. They would comment on how much happier I seemed, how my mood had improved noticeably. Rudolph would often show me pictures of his family and talk about how important it was to prioritize the people you love. I would nod and agree, believing every word of it. He seemed like the embodiment of a happy, fulfilled man, and I thought Sandra and I were building something similar. But here's what's strange about long marriages: they become ordinary. Ordinariness is like fog that descends slowly, and you don't notice the exact moment when you stop seeing the person next to you clearly. The details blur. The small gestures fade. What once felt fresh and surprising becomes routine and expected. She would still hum in the mornings, but I stopped really listening to the melody. She would still ask about my day, but I would give shorter answers, distracted by emails or work documents. The intimacy that had felt so precious transformed into the comfortable indifference of habit. We were living parallel lives in the same house, moving past each other like ships in the night. By autumn of that year, I noticed something had shifted, though I couldn't quite articulate what it was. Sandra seemed distracted during dinner conversations. She would check her phone more frequently, sometimes with a small smile I didn't recognize. I attributed it to work stress. The pharmaceutical industry is demanding after all. I told myself that everyone goes through phases where they seem distant. It was nothing to worry about. It was just the natural rhythm of a long marriage. We were still comfortable with each other. We still slept in the same bed. We still maintained the routines that defined our life together. What I didn't understand then but would come to realize later is that comfort and safety can be dangerous illusions. They can make you believe that everything is fine when everything is actually changing. They can allow you to miss the signals that someone you love is slowly pulling away from you. The fog that had settled over our marriage had made me blind to everything except my own assumptions about how things were. In November, I started to notice the pattern forming. Sandra began mentioning that the pharmacy was unusually busy, more so than in previous years. She talked about needing to pick up extra shifts to cover for colleagues who were sick or on vacation. This made sense to me. The retail pharmaceutical business does become more demanding as the holiday season approaches. People rush to refill prescriptions before the end of the year for insurance purposes. People get colds and flu. Elderly customers need their medications adjusted as they prepare for the winter months. She started coming home later. Sometimes at 8:30. Sometimes at 9. Once, not until nearly 9:30. I would be sitting in my home office, reviewing documents or preparing for the next day's client meetings, and I would hear the garage door open much later than usual. She would come inside, apologize for being late, and explain that they had been particularly slammed that afternoon. I would tell her not to worry, that I understood, that she should take care of herself and not work too hard. I was being supportive. I was being understanding. I was being exactly the kind of husband who wouldn't notice what was actually happening right in front of him. Everything began with small things in November, but the real patterns emerged more clearly as December arrived. Sandra's schedule seemed to have an odd rhythm to it. Certain days of the week stood out more than others. Tuesdays particularly. Thursdays as well. Sometimes Fridays. On these days she would mention needing to work late, or she would have appointments she hadn't mentioned before, or she would suggest going to the store after work and returning home much later than expected. It seemed logical enough at the time. The cold and flu season was upon us, people were buying medications in bulk, and December is always the busiest month in retail pharmacy. She would come home later than usual, sometimes around 9 in the evening, sometimes even later. For me, this didn't raise any alarm bells because I knew that the pharmaceutical business genuinely does pick up considerably during the winter months. December is always hectic for her workplace. My logical mind accepted the explanations. My professional training in analyzing data told me to look at the facts, and the facts seemed to support what she was telling me. But facts can be incomplete. They can only tell you what you're measuring, not what you're missing. But then, in mid-December, I noticed something on our joint bank account that my analytical mind couldn't ignore. Small amounts, $20 here, $25 there, sometimes $30 or $40, but they appeared with regularity and precision that was almost mathematical in its consistency. Every Tuesday. Every Thursday. Sometimes Friday. My professional habits, the things that have trained my mind to work with numbers, trends, and patterns, made me pay attention in a way I couldn't suppress. Numbers have always spoken to me in a language that feels more honest than words. I began checking the statements more carefully, zooming in on the details, tracing the transactions like following breadcrumbs through a forest. There was a particular merchant code that appeared repeatedly. A location code that corresponded to a specific area of Sacramento. I pulled out my phone and looked it up. The transactions were being processed at a restaurant and bar establishment. My pulse quickened slightly, but I told myself there could be perfectly innocent explanations. Maybe she was grabbing coffee with coworkers. Maybe she was having lunch with friends. Maybe there was something professional about these visits that I simply didn't know about. I began keeping a quiet log in my mind. I would check the bank account without saying anything to Sandra. I would note the dates and amounts. I would see if there was a pattern beyond the obvious days of the week. There was. The transactions were clustered in specific time frames. They seemed to happen during the middle of the day, often around lunchtime and sometimes in the late afternoon. This was odd. If she was working extra shifts, why would she be making these purchases during what should have been her working hours? It was a Thursday, December 16th, around 9 in the evening when I found the first messages. I hadn't planned to spy, I want to be clear about that. I had simply been looking for a receipt for one of my clients, and I asked Sandra if I could borrow her phone since mine was charging in the bedroom. She handed it to me without hesitation, even smiling at me as she did. That smile would hurt me more than anything else afterward. It was the smile of someone who believed they were getting away with something, the smile of someone who felt comfortable in their deception. The screen flickered with notifications as soon as I unlocked it. A hidden chat, invisible in her normal message threads, the kind that requires a specific password to access. An app designed specifically for people who want to hide their communications. The name was just a single letter. K. I'm waiting for you at the platform, the messages read. Platform? What platform? Don't tell anyone, another one said. Those words hit me like a physical blow. Your husband still hasn't noticed? Another asked, and I felt my chest tighten. This person knew about me. This person was actively wondering whether I had discovered the deception. And Sandra's replies, short but clear. Addresses. Times. Specific instructions about where to meet. Little heart emojis that she had never written to me, not even in the early days of our relationship when such symbols would have seemed natural. I didn't close the phone. I simply stood there in the kitchen, the same kitchen where we had eaten breakfast together that morning, where she had poured my coffee, kissed me on the cheek, and wished me a good day at work. She had done all of this while knowing exactly what she was planning for later that day. The kitchen suddenly felt like a stage set, a carefully constructed lie designed to deceive me. Every surface felt contaminated with dishonesty. Every memory associated with that room felt tainted. I sat down at the kitchen table and just held the phone for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. My mind was processing information the way it always does, breaking it down, categorizing it, trying to make sense of the pattern. But this time the pattern was betrayal. The next day I went through my expense archives methodically, with all the precision and care that my profession demands. In my world of taxes and finance, there is a sequence, a logic. Every number tells a story if you know how to read it. I deciphered this story over the course of 3 months of small, regular transfers to an address in Sacramento, a pub called the Obsidian View on 16th Street. It was an overlooked spot with a bar area, a tourist destination that hung above the river like a perch. I had taken Sandra there about 5 years ago, thinking that it was a special place we would visit together, somewhere unique to us. I remembered sitting at a table by the window watching the sun set over the water, thinking about how lucky I was to have found her. I began tracking the numbers with even greater attention. Tuesdays, Thursdays, sometimes Fridays. Always approximately 2 hours at a time. Sandra had been telling me she was working extra hours at the pharmacy, but I checked her work schedule through the mobile app that she had accidentally forgotten to log out of. On those specific days she was either free or working only a short shift. The app didn't lie. The records were clear and damning. The woman who claimed to be working overtime was actually free to spend hours at a bar with someone else. I tried to maintain normalcy on the surface, though inside I was fracturing. I went to work, calculated taxes for my clients, listened to Rudolph talk about his weekend plans with his children, watched him describe sending his wife flowers for no reason at all, just because he wanted her to know he was thinking about her. I said nothing to him about what I had discovered. He had no idea that my world was collapsing around me while we discussed quarterly financial reports and tax deductions and retirement planning. The office was warm and comfortable. Rudolph's desk held a family photograph. His smiling wife, his 2 children, all of them happy and genuine. Everything around me seemed so normal, so right, while my own world was breaking apart into fragments. The people around me were calculating budgets and discussing holiday parties, completely unaware that I was living a lie. I felt like an actor playing the role of a happy married man, going through the motions while my real life was imploding. I decided not to act hastily or emotionally. I began collecting evidence with the same methodical approach I use when conducting audits for clients. I gathered bank statements, noted dates and times, and compiled everything into a mental timeline. I discovered more about Kay. His name was Karl, a marketing professional at a pharmaceutical company where Sandra could have met him at industry conferences. They had been friends for about 5 years, having met through mutual acquaintances. I remembered those acquaintances. Phoebe, Sandra's friend, had mentioned him several times at gatherings over the years. I had never felt suspicious because my wife had every right to have friends. I dug deeper, using the resources available to me. Karl's social media showed photos of him at conferences, at restaurants, always with that confident smile of someone who takes what he wants without hesitation. I saw pictures of him at the Obsidian View with various people, but never with Sandra. They were being careful, at least on the surface. But the transactions didn't lie. The timeline didn't lie. The hidden messages didn't lie. Every piece of evidence pointed toward the same conclusion. My wife had been meeting another man at a bar for hours at a time, multiple times a week, and she had been lying to me about it. The evidence mounted slowly and inexorably. I had enough information now. I had more than enough. I had a complete picture of betrayal. When I felt I had sufficient evidence, I decided to have a conversation with her. I chose a Saturday evening when we were sitting on the couch in the living room, supposedly watching a movie that neither of us was actually paying attention to. The windows had frosted over, snow was hitting against the glass. It was the kind of perfect winter atmosphere that should have been cozy but instead felt ominous and heavy with tension. I turned off the television without saying anything. The sudden silence filled the room like a physical presence. "We need to talk about the Obsidian View," I said, and I watched her face change in an instant. All the color drained from her cheeks. She looked like someone who had just realized that the ground beneath her feet was gone, that everything she had built on top of lies was about to collapse. I showed her the bank statements. Numbers she couldn't deny. Facts printed in black and white. She started to explain something, then stopped. Then she began to cry. And finally, she confessed. All of it. It started with jokes, she said, with lunches at the pharmacy where they worked in nearby buildings, with conversations about work and life and all the things we had stopped talking about. Karl had told her that she had changed, that she deserved more attention than she was getting from the man who was supposed to love her most. He would come to her workplace and wait during her break so they could go up to that bar during the daylight hours and just be near each other, talking and laughing and feeling alive. She knew it was wrong, she said, but she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. She felt seen and heard and valued. She felt like someone's priority instead of an afterthought. She felt young again. She didn't say that he carried her on his hands or rode a black horse. She simply said that he listened to her. That he was interested in her thoughts and feelings. That he looked at her the way I had stopped looking at her, with desire, with genuine curiosity, with the kind of attention that makes you feel like you matter. I felt myself empty. Not angry, anger would come later, much later, like a delayed reaction, but hollowed out, like a jar that had been poured out and refilled thousands of times until nothing real remained inside. I was just a vessel. A container of pain. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click like if you enjoy this story. I always read your comments and analyze which stories you like best so that I can create better stories. Thank you. I will continue the story. The divorce proceeded over 8 months. I hired an attorney, but I didn't spend money on scandal or drama. My work had taught me that the most valuable thing is knowing when to expend resources and when to conserve them. I purchased precious stones, 3 sapphires, as a collection as investments. I began investing in stocks of a stable pharmaceutical company, taking financial advice from a consultant I knew. I invested everything I had and everything I could earn. I knew that the divorce would be expensive, and I wanted to have something that wouldn't be divided on a piece of paper. In the property settlement, I received the house, most of the investments, and the car. Sandra received her portion and what she hoped would be a fresh start, hoping that somehow it would lead to happiness. We had no children, which I suppose was a small mercy. At least there was no child caught in the middle of this, no young heart broken by adult failures. My sister Bridget stood by me. She visited more frequently than she ever had before. We didn't talk much about what had happened, but she sat with me, drank tea, and simply existed in my presence. Her quiet support meant more than any words could have conveyed. She didn't judge me or Sandra. She simply understood that life had broken something that couldn't easily be fixed. As for Sandra and Karl, this was the most bitter part. They separated about 3 months after my divorce from Sandra was finalized. It turned out that the entire affair had been fueled by secrecy, novelty, and the thrill of hiding. When there was no longer a secret to keep, no more risk, no more excitement, just an ordinary person beside you who was disappointed in you, the affair lost its power. Karl went back to his previous girlfriend. Sandra found out through mutual friends, the way half of Sacramento seemed to find out. She changed jobs a few months later, moving to another pharmacy further from downtown. I heard through Rudolph that she looked forced, diminished somehow, but I stopped listening to gossip. It no longer interested me. Her life had become irrelevant to me in a way that surprised me with its completeness. What I did wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't do anything cruel or deliberately harmful to her. I simply lived forward. I built my financial security in such a way that her actions couldn't devastate me. I allowed life to unfold naturally, and nature showed her that when you choose illusion, the illusion disappears when everyone finds out about it. Reality is harsh that way. Over time, the pain became less acute. It evolved from a sharp knife to a dull ache, and eventually the ache faded to something like a scar, something that would always be part of me but no longer caused constant pain. I began going out with friends again. I started looking at people with less suspicion, though I remained cautious. I became wiser, perhaps, or simply more realistic about human nature. I understood that closeness requires constant work, constant attention, constant choice to pick each other. It requires you to see the person next to you and choose to keep seeing them, every single day. My first marriage ended because we were too different. My second ended because we forgot how to remain close. Both lessons cost me dearly, but they were worth the price. The house on Magnolia Street is entirely mine now. I live in it alone, and it's no longer a couple's house. It's my space, my time, my silence. Sometimes Bridget comes over and cooks dinner for me, and then we sit and watch the sun set over the snowy mountains far on the horizon. It's not about being happy. Happiness isn't the word I use anymore. But I'm at peace. I'm at peace with what happened, and I'm at peace with what I chose to do about it. Before I finish this story, I want to say, I don't regret letting Sandra go. I regret the years I spent being sad about her. Because it turns out that the greatest revenge is simply being well without someone who chose to leave you. Thank you for watching this video. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. The screen now displays a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.